What's up YouTube? Thanks for joining the channel. If you guys have been following my channel for a little bit of time, you know that I got the Indian Scout Bobber this year. So I've had a few months of time to riding this bike and enjoying it and experiencing it for all it's worth. And I have some thoughts about, the Indian Scout Bobber as it relates to, the pros and cons. When I did my research, there's some things that I learned, things that are kind of obvious about the Scout Bobber. And throughout the test ride I learned a lot more, but there's things that I feel like you should know that I didn't really learn. So let's get started. So let's talk about some of the things that you may have already known about the Scout Bobber, right? Like when you're doing your research, things that you find out, they're very, things that a lot of the YouTubers will say, things that the video reviews will say, things that, even Indian motorcycles will say. Let's start with the power and performance. Performance is fantastic. 100 horsepower, I think 70 foot-pounds of torque. It is just a really fun bike to ride. So you know that going in, you know about the performance, you can read a spec sheet. So performance is great. Comfort, you probably have figured out that it's not the most comfortable bike. It's a bobber after all, right? So, the factory shocks, 2 inches of travel, it does not have a lot of movement there. And the stock seat, people will talk about the stock seat not being so great, and it's not very comfortable. It's a bobber after all. So if you're getting into a bobber, any bobber really, as a matter of fact, for the comfort, I think you'll be disappointed. The other things that you may know, it's a fantastic looking motorcycle. I think it stands out, it gets lots of compliments. You already know this, you already know all about all of this, right? So those are like the 3 main things. There's probably other things that I, am not including in here. That's not what this video is about, but things that you may find out a little bit after the fact, after having the Scout Bobber for a while. What is it that I'm noticing? Let's go over a few things. So the first thing that I noticed as soon as I got these slip-ons, and they're like cheap slip-ons from Amazon, is that the Indian Scout Bobber is ridiculously loud. That is the first thing that I want to just let you all know. If you're looking into a Scout Bobber, thinking about getting an aftermarket exhaust, whether it's slip-on or full exhaust system, it is really loud. Even with my earplugs in, like if I go for a ride for about 60 minutes or so, it is just throbbing in my ear. That's what she said. Overall, in general, it is a very loud bike. The second thing that I called out that I didn't even know until I got this bike, mine came with a USB charger, with a USB port. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's right here. There's a little door. I think that came stock with my Indian Scout Bobber 20. I didn't see any of that in like the specs. I do believe that this is fully stock when I bought it, so it must have come with it. I know for those people that have older models, like 2018 or so, it wasn't stock for them. Like they actually sell aftermarket, inserts, like USB plugs that you can plug into here. I just saw a video last night about that, so I was like, I didn't know. So that's one thing. If you're looking at a newer model, you should check for the USB charger. I think it'll come with it stock, which is like just a little thing, but it makes a big difference. When I use my phone a lot for navigation and music, so it's great to have a USB charger on your Scout Bobber. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is aftermarket support. I'm coming at this as a Harley rider where aftermarket support is bountiful. There's just a lot of options out there. Coming to Indian, I kind of knew that the aftermarket support is not quite up to par with Harley. I knew that going in. But what I didn't know is what that does to the aftermarket prices, I think. At least that's how I think it works, where, if there isn't a huge supply, the cost is going to go up because there's not a lot of competition. And so, for example, when I was looking at seats for the Scout Bobber, man, they were really expensive. For a comfort seat or anything above like that, it's like $400, $500, or maybe even more. And that's just a seat. The shocks are like $700 that I've seen from Progressives. Like the parts for your Indian Scout Bobber or Indian motorcycles in general, they're kind of expensive. I had a Sportster before this, and I have a Lowrider S, and usually I feel like I can find the parts that kind of fit my budget. But with the Scout Bobber, man, I personally think that you have to break the bank a little bit more than you would with a Harley. That's just my opinion. Could be wrong, but there isn't a whole lot of supply, which means that the cost generally goes up. Related to the point about aftermarket parts, I will say the Scout Bobber, I don't think you need to do a whole lot to your stock Scout Bobber to make it fun. All I've done so far is put some slip-ons, like cheap slip-ons from Amazon, put an LED headlight, change out the seat. I haven't done a whole lot to this bike. Usually with a Harley, you gotta do the stage one, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you definitely gotta change out the seat. With the Indian Scout Bobber, like, yes, I still want to change out a few things, but my desire, or like the feeling like I need to change out to do a stage one, to get the pipes, to get the tuner and all that stuff, I don't feel like I need to do it, because this bike is just super fun as it comes, as it is stock. If you didn't change anything about the Scout Bobber, or if you only changed the one or two things, like, that's more than enough, in my opinion, to have fun on this bike. I actually think this bike is really good in terms of performance, like right out of the box. All right, so what's next? What did I find out later that I wish I would have known before I bought this bike? This is a little minor thing. I remember when I test rode the bike thinking, where's the air intake? And it wasn't until much later that I was like, oh, it's underneath the tank. I found that out. Well, that's a bit of a bummer, because on a Harley, you know, the air intake is on the outside and it's relatively, like, very easy to change out. But with the Scout Bobber, I gotta take the tank off, and, you know, I gotta do this and I gotta do that. And I know I'm crying a little bit, I'm being a little baby about it, but it is what it is. I wish it was a little bit easier to change out the stock air intake to something different, because I know that I'm gonna want to upgrade it at some point. Again, like, I'm really nitpicking here because there isn't a whole lot that would change my opinion of the Scout Bobber, but I just thought for the intents and purposes of this video that I would call that out. When I bought the Scout Bobber, I joined a bunch of Scout Bobber Facebook groups, just kind of perusing, seeing what people are talking about, and I swear 1 out of 3 or 4 Facebook posts are about the battery. The stock battery on the Scout Bobber is terrible. It is terrible. I will see people complaining about how the battery has died. Like, it is just so common in the Facebook forum. But that's something that you should keep in mind if you just bought a brand new Scout Bobber, or even if you bought like a pre-owned Scout Bobber. Check out the battery. When I bought my Scout Bobber 20 at the dealership, you know, went to go check it out, asked them if I could start the bike, and the bike wouldn't start, and of course it was the stock battery. Luckily for me, they changed it out right on the spot before I bought it, obviously, but that just goes to show you that the stock battery is pretty terrible. And if you haven't had issues with it, you probably will. So that is something to keep in mind. Maybe you might want to go out and buy a backup battery just in case. But even with all of those things, I would still buy this bike 100%, 10 times out of 10. It's just such a fun bike, and you know, it has so much power and it's so smooth, and surprisingly it handles really well. Yes, it could use some improvement in a few areas, the suspension being probably the first thing, but other than that, like, I would say Indian did a fantastic job on the Scout Bobber, and probably the reason why the Scout Bobber is so popular. That's gonna do it for me, guys. Thanks for tuning in to the channel. Thanks for tuning into this video. If you liked this content, please subscribe. We'll have more Scout Bobber or Indian content in the future. But yeah, I'm gonna sign out. But thanks for tuning in, and until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.